Hey, everybody, this is Shane R. Monroe, and you are in the passenger seat with me. It's Passenger Seat Radio. It is December 3rd, 2021, and we are not in the hot tub. We're not in the car. We are, in fact, on a call with the amazing Warren Davis, my guest today, famous for games such as Q Bert, Joust 2, the laserdisc game Us versus Them, Terminator 2, Revolution X, and we could just keep going and going and going. Welcome to the show, Warren.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure is all mine, and soon to be my listeners as well. So the last time we spoke, man, this was Classic Gaming Expo 2003. That's almost 20 years.
That's a lifetime ago.
It's a lifetime ago, right? It feels like 2
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Yeah, you think about it. Next year's the 40th anniversary of QBert. I developed
Wow.
the game in 1982, so 2003 is like half of his life cycle ago.
Man, I feel like I should be out like buying coffins or something at this point. I blink and 20 years goes by, 40 years goes by. It's
Mm,
unbelievable.
it is indeed.
Well, Retro Gaming Radio is no more. I did everything I could with that show, and I think eventually Retro just kind of ran out. I told all the stories. I ran that for what, 12 years? So, but I am glad to be able to bring you onto this new podcast. I've been running this one for 15 or 16 years at this point, and a lot
Wow.
of my listeners followed me. So, you're going to be reaching the Retro Gaming Radio audience, and thanks to social media, just about everybody else too, I think. So. And while this is an audio show primarily, we are going to be broadcasting this on YouTube, so you can see Warren in all of his glory. And I'm going to be doing inserts. I'm going to be doing insert videos, overlays, and all that good stuff for the YouTube video. So most of you are just used to listening to this show, but in this case, we're going to make it a nice video presentation as well. That'll be available on YouTube on my channel, Monroe World. But enough about me. Warren isn't just here to catch up or for his health. He has written a stellar new book called Creating QBert and Other Classic Video Arcade Games. That's a long title. Fortunately, Creating QBert is kind of the top level there.
That's the
And that's,
bigger part, and
what's
then the
that?
rest of it is a little subtitle. So it's
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
You
So
don't
I
have
can
to
just
say
call it
that
Creating
whole.
QBert then.
Yeah.
Okay.
We went, talking to the publisher, we went through lots and lots of titles because, because I thought, well, I am known mostly for QBert, but this book is about my entire career in the arcade industry, and
Yeah.
I worked on, as you said, so many more things, but I didn't know how to get that into the title. Anyway, so that subtitle is what we compromised on.
I like it. It's just sometimes it's a little long off the tongue there. And it's going to be available at Amazon and Barnes and Noble on December 21st. And that's
Actually, if I may, it's
please.
available now.
It
You can
is.
jump on there right now and pre-order. It's available everywhere that you might, where
Oh, good.
finer books are sold.
Great, great. And that's available both digitally and thank you, hardback. Thank you for not making that a paperback.
Not my choice. In fact,
Really?
if you know anything about the history of the book, I originally self-published about, I want to say, was it what year is this? This is 2021.
2021, last I checked, but I
I think
could
it
be
was
totally wrong.
2 years ago. I came out with a self-published version of the book. I was totally prepared to just self-publish. And it came out just before the pandemic hit. So all of my
Mm.
planned appearances, I took the book to one show, which is Free Play Florida in 2019, and then all of my appearances for 2020 got canceled because of the pandemic. So,
Wow.
um, uh, in my boredom, as I sat in my home doing nothing for months, I reached out to some publishers, and then found a publisher who was interested. And so that began a very long road towards the republishing now of this book, which is essentially the same book, but the publisher had requests, and so there are some very slight differences. But and that means that anybody who did get a copy of the original version, which by the way had a different title, it was called "You Can't Call It," blah, 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 and that is the cartoon balloon of QBert's swearing.
Right.
So, and that title was indicative of a story in the book, which we could talk about. But anyway, it had a different title, um, so those are collector's items. As soon as I made a deal with the publisher, I'm no longer allowed
Sure.
to print or publish the original, which was a paperback, just strictly for cost reasons,
Sure.
really.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm happy that you're pleased it's going to be hardback.
I am. And, it used to be, it was always about cost and cost and cost and let's get it as cheap as we can. But there have been such beautiful books, like artwork books of classic video gaming. I guess they call them coffee table books, where
Mhm.
you open these up and there's these beautiful, gorgeous color pictures of arcade cabinets. You can't really do that with a paperback. You're kind of holding it like this, you're breaking the spine, but there's just something awesome about having that book in your hand. So I'm pleased that it's hardback. I imagine it probably raised the price a little bit, but I'm happy to pay it. My
But
pre-order's in.
and I wouldn't call this a coffee table book by any
No,
stretch,
no,
but
no, no.
again, it's sort of out. That decision is kind of out of my hands. It's a publisher's decision.
So speaking of publishing a book, especially in this day and age with everything that's going on, I mean, I know there's no computer chips in there, right? But have there been
Not that I'm
problems?
aware of.
Yeah, hey, you never know. Publisher prerogative, after all. Was there any trouble getting your book published during the pandemic?
Yes, and I'd have to say it's ongoing.
Oh,
Technically, the book even it's available for pre-order and has been for some time. And the process of just doing any book is a fairly slow one, as I've come to learn. This has really been a sort of an eye-opening experience for me, having never worked with a publisher.
I
But
bet.
there's lead times involved, and there's printing and shipping and binding. And right now, in fact, the book is actually scheduled to be bound. It was supposed to be bound today, this day
Wow.
that we're talking. It's at the binders, supposedly going to be, and so this would start a process where then it would be bound, it would be shipped to the warehouse, it'd be mailed out to the pre-orders and available for purchase. But it's unclear whether it actually is going to make their deadline of being bound today. And again, it's all COVID related stuff.
Yeah, that's
It's
crazy.
affecting every industry. It's affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways, and I'm just sort of caught up in it. But I'm very optimistic. It will get out there very soon, and people will be able to hopefully enjoy it.
So, one of my listeners, I solicited my listeners for some questions for you, and one of the questions that we got was, is it possible to get an autographed copy if we buy directly from you or anything like that?
That's a great question, and yes, happily, I'm happy to say the answer is yes.
Awesome.
I do. When I was self-publishing, I created a website so that I could sell autograph copies. Certainly, I'm trying to make appearances at retro gaming shows around the country, and so if you can see me, I'd be happy to autograph a copy in person. Once I've got books in my hand, I will be taking them to shows to sell and sign. But if you want to order one, once I can actually get copies in my hand, I will then make them available on my website for purchase, and you can have them autographed or not. I
Awesome.
take requests on how you want them autographed. If you just want a signature, if you want it personalized,
That's
happy
great.
to accommodate people. But that site is Warren Davis Shop, all one word, Warren Davis Shop .square, SQUARE .site, SITE.
Okay.
And currently, again, it's not available because I don't
You
have the
don't have
books in
them.
my hands,
Yeah.
but I will make them available once I can get them.
Well, we'll make sure the link is in the description below, along with the Amazon link and Barnes and Noble link and anything else you provide to me that you'd like them to have to make sure they can get your book.
Sure, sounds good.
All right. Well, I've got a laundry list of stuff here, and bless you for giving me your time. So I read the book over the course between 2 and 3 days, on and off. I was glued to it when I was able to get the time for it, and let's start off with this. So I don't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. Some days I don't remember breakfast today. And you say in the introduction that many memories were jogged by recent conversations with your colleagues. What sort of challenges are involved in writing a book that you made a steady disclaimer that was not a historical record? They're your memories as you remember them. But when you're trying to write something with historical reference like that, you strive for accuracy and you want to fill in the gaps in your memory. Did you do anything special when researching this book?
Um, I mean, it was absolutely a concern of mine when I first had the idea to collect a lot of my stories and write a book. That was like probably my primary concern, is like, I remember enough of the details to make it an interesting story? I mean, memory is a weird thing, but thankfully, because of all the retro gaming shows that are out there, and because I was attending them and I was running into old colleagues, I had opportunities to bring things up. If there were things that I felt were fuzzy, I would ask about them and say, well, what are your memories about that? And I found that for the most part, I think my memories were, in concert with most other people. So that helped. And every now and then a colleague would supply a story, a little detail, or a little thing that I'd forgotten. So, I basically just sort of accumulated the details as I went along. I mean, it was a long process to write this. It took me probably 2 years, I want to say. And so if I felt like I had something that I'd already written about, but I learned something new, I'd go back and I'd incorporate the new details and things like that. And
That's awesome. That's going to be a very iterative process then over
it
time,
was
right?
an iterative process, not unlike making a video game,
If
because
we're going to talk about that, I've got a question in here that actually uses that word.
all right, well, I'll hold off. But so
Okay.
yeah, it was a huge concern, and I do feel like I feel like I did pretty well. I can't swear that everything, because I'm not a researcher,
Right.
and so that's the only reason I put in the disclaimer. But I do feel it's pretty accurate.
So the book opens with sort of a lighthearted discussion, framing what technology was like when you got started. And there's no internet, there's no color TV, there's no computers, and
Wait. There were color TVs.
well, but you were talking about watching shows in black and white,
Oh,
you
in
know.
my
So
childhood, right?
right,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I grew up in a similar time area as you. I think you're a couple years older than maybe, but I try to share that time frame with my children or my friends' children or nieces and nephews, and I find it almost impossible to try to relate technology levels like that. By the way, you did a succinct job in the book. I thought it was really well done. I'm gonna unofficially swipe it to be telling my family members about it. But you
Feel free.
actually had a generation of computer programming before me. I mean, after all, my first computer was a TRS-80 Model 3 with a cassette drive, which I bet you
Mhm.
would have loved to have had a cassette drive, because you were the punch card programming, the tape programming, and easily the most fascinating discussions in the book was working with computers like the Monroe Bot, which by the way, great name, Monroe Bot
Mhm.
11 computer. Can you share a little bit about what that process was like for you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was fascinated by computers from a very early age, and I found an aptitude for math. So even also from an early age, it was just something that sort of came easy to me. Um, and I just happened to be lucky enough to go to a high school in New York, Sheepshead Bay High School, that just happened to have, and this was such a rare thing, I can't even begin to describe, but they happened to have a computer that was available for students, and it was the size of a desk. It was literally a desk with a typewriter on it, because we didn't have CRT screens as we know of them today.
So there's no
Um,
visual. You can't see what you're typing, really. I
well,
mean,
you're typing, so you can
you're
see it on a
on
piece of
paper.
paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're literally typing, and the machine is taking in the keys that you are typing, and then it's typing. Like if you program it to do something, it starts typing on its own. So that's how it communicates back to you.
Wow.
Um, and but yeah, it was science fiction basically. to me, and I learned how to program it, and I actually was it was another odd thing because I was a sophomore when I started learning how to use this computer. Normally you had to be a junior, but I
Hmm.
think so. There were these senior guys who were in charge of the computer lab, and there were no juniors who I guess were capable or
Hmm.
deemed worthy enough to be their successor. So I was a sophomore, and so I became their successor. So I learned my sophomore year, and then I was in charge of the computer. Once they left, I was in charge of the computer lab for the next 2 years. Anyway, but
Yeah.
it was an amazing time. It was a fun time. It was an experimental time, and yeah.
No, well, and college didn't seem like it was that much better. So we'll fast forward a little bit, and we were talking about RPI, you creating a gin rummy game on punch cards. And you only talk about it for a few paragraphs. When I went back to look at the book after I'd read it and I was trying to build my notes, I swear you talked about that longer. But you had talked about the concept of iteration of that software and explain to them about. I always pictured that you had a terminal in your office that you would have punch cards and you would feed them in, and that's how you taught the computer. But you had to go to a mainframe, right?
Yeah, right. There were no terminals when I was a freshman, and when I came to RPI. I think my senior year is when they first installed CRT terminals for students to use. So it just took a while for them to filter down for average use. But when I was a freshman, the only computer you had available to you was the mainframe in the big computer lab, and you literally walked with your program, whether it was wrapped in rubber bands or if it was a big enough program, you had these punch cards in a box, and you had to carry them into the lab, hand them off to somebody,
They had to be in
and then
order.
well, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You get them out of order, you're in big trouble. You would have to hand them off to somebody, and then they would take it and they'd put them at the end of all the other programs they had to run, and usually you'd come back the next day
Oh my
and get
God.
your cards back with a printout of the results.
And people get pissed they can't next day Amazon.
It was a different time.
And you
So
had to,
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say you couldn't really do anything until you got your results back, and then if you had a bug, you had to fix it and then send it in and go through the process again.
Yeah, and so the process again isn't a matter of taking one card out of that deck and fixing the code on that card and then putting that in sort of iteratively. You had to get that whole stack again and take that whole stack back down, right?
Well, they would give you the stack back, and
Oh, okay.
if your bug was in one card, then you'd only had to replace that one card.
But you still had to give them the whole stack back. You couldn't
Oh
say
yeah,
my program is this and here replace this card,
you
right?
got to. Well, they wouldn't do it. You would do it. I mean,
Okay.
like again, you hand them a stack,
Right.
they run it, they give you the stack and the results back.
Gotcha.
So I look at the results. If there's a bug, I figure out what statements were where the bug is, and I have to replace those cards. And then I give them this. Then I
The
repeat
whole
the
stack
process.
had to go back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, Unity developers need to stop complaining. That's all I have to say. Um, let's move on to another small portion of your pre-video game days. Let's talk about Bell Laboratories.
Hmm.
You were working on consoles for telephone operators, and I love in the book, you're like, I got to tell you what a telephone operator is, because I
I
was
mean,
thinking about it.
really,
My 15-year-old son doesn't know what a telephone operator is.
yeah,
He can
yeah.
maybe put the words together and say, oh, he's an operator for the telephone. But you did mention something really interesting about making calls to your friends in Israel, or a friend in Israel.
Yes.
So I may have dabbled in a previous life when I was a juvenile, by the way, in the world of boxing, and not boxing, but more like blue boxing or
Oh,
rainbow boxing. So when you start talking about making calls to Israel and having access to these consoles, I was always wondering, did you understand the technology of the blue box and the 2600 hertz and all that stuff, or were you strictly hardware?
I was not hardware. Honestly, I wasn't hardware or
Oh,
software.
okay.
I was in the testing group.
Ah,
So
okay.
what that meant was, people, the hardware existed. The console that the operator sat at was pretty
Gotcha.
much standard. Uh, and then they would keep coming out with these different software revs with new features and such. And then
Okay.
when they decided to release that, they would have to install it into a non-operational office somewhere in the country.
Oh,
And then we would go in for months and test the new features and test the old features to make sure they still work.
wow.
And then when we were done, it would go live, and then they could, obviously other places in the country could get that software update as well. I wasn't really. I mean, I was trained as a hardware engineer and a software engineer. That was my schooling. I opted for an engineering program that was sort of like a mix of hardware and software, but I didn't get to do any hardware working on the operator consoles. I actually was I was loaned out at Bell Labs to a different division where I actually did some hardware design, but that had nothing to do with the operator consoles.
Gotcha.
That had to do with pattern recognition of speech, which was
Oh,
an interesting project also. But getting back to the operator thing, yeah, I didn't dabble in any of that sort of blue box hardware or anything like that, and I just had the opportunity to make free phone calls from the offices in which we were testing.
that's still pretty cool, though.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
So throughout the book, you constantly go back to or discuss your acting career. And throughout the book, it sounds to me like the tale of a man with his heart sort of pulled in two different directions. And it's funny, when I was in high school, I felt like I had a fork in the road where I was either going to go into criminal law or I was going to go into computers. I went to computers, and I think I did the right thing. So um, but it's felt like you were always pulled. In some cases, it was fortuitous that you were pulled. In other cases, it seemed like it was tugging your heart the other way. So tell us a little bit about that early acting background, because you're the QBert guy, but I think it's fascinating that you have this big acting background.
Yeah, it sort of astonishes me as well. Because as a child, and I do think I mentioned this in the book, I as a child, I was not interested in being an actor. My interests were both computers, always interesting, fascinated by computers, but also in filmmaking.
Oh,
And I used to make films with a friend of mine when we were kids. Specifically, we'd make monster movies, and I was fascinated by monster makeup, so I would make myself up to be the monster. But the performance part of it was not like I never thought I would be an
hmm.
actor or had any desire. But I've
Ah,
always, even from a very, very early age, wanted to entertain people. I've always been that's been my thing. I just feel entertainment is something that is worthwhile. It lifts people, and I just always wanted to do that in some way. So video games is certainly a way to do that. Acting is a way to do that. Filmmaking is a way to do that. So all of these things sort of fit in. But I really wasn't interested in acting until college. And I kind of was dragged into an audition by a friend. So I did radio in college. Okay, I had a
oh,
radio show,
that's
and
cool.
one I had the opportunity to do like little comedy bits on my radio show. And then my senior year, I did a radio show with these two guys, one of whom was heavily involved in the theater group at my college.
Oh,
And so, he got me to go to an audition. I got cast in a play. No real training. I think I out of curiosity, I took acting one
right.
as a class that my school offered, which was like really not. My school was a technical school. RPI was not a liberal arts college.
Right.
So, but they did have acting one, which was mostly silly exercises and weird stuff. Anyway, but I got cast and I did this play, and I have to say I had so much fun doing that. And the curtain call to stand up and take a bow and have people applauding was intoxicating. It was like a drug. And I thought, maybe I should do this some more. So as I went out through my life, I did it more community theater, until I actually quit Bell Labs and moved into Chicago proper. I was in the suburbs of Chicago, and I moved into Chicago to study at Second City because I thought, I don't really want to be an actor. I don't feel like I relate to these drama people, as I would think of it. Okay, so let me just clarify. My impression of actors were the kids in the drama club in high school.
Yeah, that
That
was
was my
me.
impression
So
of actors, and so
not
uh,
real actors.
yeah, I didn't feel like I fit into them. I loved doing like I said, the show in college. And I loved, I did a couple of other plays in college and I had fantastic experience. I loved doing community theater, but, I never saw myself as as a career choice. But when I quit Bell Labs and I moved in Chicago, I had seen shows at Second City and I thought, oh, that stuff I think I can do, the improvisation.
Yeah.
So when I moved in Chicago, I went to Second City and I said, "Where do you go to study this?" And they pointed me to the Players Workshop, which is a school that taught improvisation, run by a legend in the improv world, Josephine Forsberg. And I took a year's worth of I took their entire program. It was a year, and then I started performing with a comedy group, sketch comedy, improv. Um, you know, and again, I didn't stick with it because I got a job making video games, and honestly, um, I, I did get tired of it after a while. I just felt like it wasn't quite for me. And then I got interested in actual performance, and then I took a real acting technique program, which I was taking while I was making games at Gottlieb.
Yeah. I think I've got some notes about that too. So we may have to come back to this topic again. Sometimes I wasn't sure how these questions would play out. So,
I do want to say something though, because you said something about my heart being tugged in two directions. I I don't know that it was that my heart was tugged. I never felt like I wanted to do one without the other, and I've
hmm,
always been able to do both. So I feel very
yeah.
fortunate,
Yeah.
in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's like I can't imagine completely giving up one
Right.
and just doing the other. So I tend to I don't know if it's I get bored easily, but I like doing a lot of different things.
And it's apparent in the book that you enjoy the shuffle. For some people, that would be crazy. They wouldn't be able to do that or even want to do that. But
Hmm.
and so yeah, just sort of an observation that I made, and we'll talk more about the acting stuff here in a little bit. So let's move to Gottlieb. So Ron Waxman sounds like a real piece of work. You tell a story or two about him in the book, including meeting him outside the building for your job interview. And honestly, I really thought we were going to get more Ron stories later in the book, but you brought him up a couple of times, and I didn't. I feel like there's more stories there, but um, tell us about interviewing there at Gottlieb, because I think interviewing, based on all the classic developers I've talked to over the decades, it seems a lot different applying for a job then than what it's like now.
Oh yeah. Oh my
So,
God.
so tell us about the Gottlieb interview a little
Well,
bit.
it was such a different time in that the video game industry was still relatively new. It's not like a million people, although Gottlieb was one of the last of the coin op companies to get into video games. Williams was already Williams had come out with Defender by then. Pac-Man was out. Um, I mean, pretty much everybody, Stern, all the pinball manufacturers, certainly. I mean, obviously, many of the Japanese companies were making video games, but as far as
Sure.
American companies, Gottlieb, I think, was the last of the major pinball manufacturers to decide to go with video games. They came out with a couple of licensed games, Japanese developed games that they licensed and manufactured before they decided we should put together an in-house video game team. And even then, I sort of came in, I want to say later, about a year after they made that decision. So they had a very small team. And the other thing I should say about the interview is that I kind of went into that with a little bit of an attitude because I had quit Bell Labs thinking I'm done with engineering. I just
Right.
thought I'm gonna be an improviser or an actor or something like that. This engineering thing, I'm giving up on it because as much as I enjoyed some of my experiences at Bell Labs, there were other things about Bell Labs that were very corporate, and I just felt like I didn't fit in with the other people, and
Yeah.
so so I, I went to this interview with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, going, like, I don't really know if I want to go back to engineering. As much as I desperately loved the idea of making video games, I was like, I'm prepared to, walk away. But the interview itself was, I don't know how to describe it really, but first there was that encounter with Ron outside the building, where basically I didn't know who this guy was, and he just says, "Oh, watch out for that Waxman guy. He can be a real asshole," you know. And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Hey, thanks for the heads up.
That's a weird thing for somebody to say. And then, of course, it turns out he's that Waxman guy. As I'm let in later on, like I think the last interview I had was with Waxman.
That's hilarious.
I had a middle manager named Bill Jacobs. Was the guy who sort of gave me the tour around. He introduced me to people, showed me the place. They were off-site. Gottlieb had their main plant in North Lake, Illinois, but we were in Bensonville in a plant that was pretty much dormant. It was a manufacturing facility, but there were no games to make at the time. So it was a huge, empty plant being set up as a line for manufacturing video games, but none to be made. Tim Skelly was working on Reactor at the time, but it wasn't quite ready for production. It was almost ready for production when I started. Anyway, so I went through that interview, but it turned out Waxman, once he came off very gruff and hard to read. But once you got to know him, he was just an absolute pussycat. I mean, he was just this guy who you'd be afraid of maybe to look at, or the first time you met him. But he was a wonderful guy, and he and Howie Rubin, who was the VP. Ron was the VP of engineering. Howie was the VP of business development, and the two of them created the video division at Gottlieb and ran it. And they are the heroes. I dedicated the book to them. They really are the people who shepherded all of us who worked there and gave us an environment to work in. And I can't say enough about him. Howie's still around, and man, it's like he hasn't changed. Ron passed away a few years ago, but Howie's still out there, still kicking. He's as crazy as ever.
I was fascinated by something as I was reading the book. You many people that were involved in the industry, at least early on, and this makes sense when you think about it, but I don't know why it struck me, but they never released a game. You kept talking about people that were working for these groups that they didn't have a game under their belt. They had no providence, and yet they were at these big name companies. Honestly, that was you too, right? I mean, talent.
I'd never made a video game in my life, so I didn't know how to do that. But
right.
The number of people who had created video games in America, it's a short list. So if you
you mentioned Tim Skelly. I mean, he had a couple of games under his belt, so he was kind of like royalty, right? Because he knew what was going on. He'd done this before. So what was the development team like that? Yeah, what's that?
He was the rock star. He was the guy we looked up to, and he became the sort of unofficial mentor for the team, for the entire group.
So, like, when you have one, like, old Sawbones, I mean, I know the guy was probably like 20 or something, but when you have the old Sawbones there and everybody else was just trying to figure things out, how was from a development team point of view, how did that kind of work day to day?
Well, I mean, it's not like Tim was looking over our shoulders every day. Like I said, he was the unofficial mentor. So he was just doing his thing.
Gotcha.
And, we all learned by just sort of seeing what he was doing. If we had questions, we could come to him and he would answer them. He would sometimes give us algorithms. Like he gave me a random number generator when I needed one, and things like that. So, he was just helpful. He was, but as we were all on our own. It was, our mandate from management was make a game. Just make yourself a video game. And
Oh, just make a game.
management knew that none of us knew how to make a video game. We were learning. And they kind of knew that nobody knew what a good video game was at that point. I mean, they knew that. So they gave people freedom. And, they had a small group of programmers at the beginning. And then after the success of, let's say, QBert and, Mad Planets did pretty well. That was Kan Yamamoto. And then Mach 3 was another huge hit for them. Then they had money coming in and they started to expand. But it's a whole long story.
It's interesting, though. So you do tell another fascinating tale about a possible Superman 2 game by Tom Malinowski. Sorry if I butcher any of these names. Please feel free to correct
That's
me.
exactly his name.
And part of the game, in your part of the game, was dealing with Rubble. This fascinated me because I'm a game player still. I'm 50 something and I'm still playing video games. And I am an amateur game developer. Nothing of your clout, of course, but I put a couple of things out. So I found this really interesting from a technical standpoint about how you approached the concept of getting rid of this Rubble. And it's really good. When you buy the book, hint, buy the book, and you read this piece of it, I love your thought process of clearing the Rubble, a seemingly simple task, and it was interesting. But you did mention, though, that, of course, Warner Brothers owned the franchise, and Godlib was owned by Columbia Pictures. So yeah, that licensing wasn't going to happen. I mean, it just wasn't. Yeah. It wasn't going to happen. But I'm always curious when people talk about that, like how far into the game development process was the IP still alive in there? It still looked like Superman. It still looked like Zod. It had the IP, mesh on it. How long did that happen before you guys gave up?
Oh, I'm not even sure. Tom was working on this game before I came along.
Okay.
And I sort of, I was sort of given to him as a means of me learning the ropes.
That's cool.
Learning how to program on our hardware, which, by the way, was really fairly easy to program on. It was a sprite-based system, so it wasn't like it was challenging, to get stuff going. But there was a lot to learn, and but Tom, basically just farmed out something very simple and separate from the actual gameplay, because that's what he was working on. But as far as the character licensing, I mean, I think all of that happened before I was hired. So I think by the time I was hired, they knew they weren't getting that Superman license, and it was, but they didn't care. It was like, look, there's Superman, and then there's generic superhero. So as long as we don't make him Superman, we can do whatever we want. And listen, you're talking about literally like 16 pixels.
Right. You're not worrying about digital likenesses there.
Yeah, exactly. And I always sing the praises of Jeff Lee, who created in 16 pixels, created characters with personalities, characters with distinct looks and walks. 16 by 16 grid and 16 colors for the entire game, and it just astonishes me what he was able to accomplish.
I'll skip a question or two here, because I definitely wanted to talk about him. So the Godlib graphic artist Jeff Lee sounds like simply an amazing human being in general, and he appears all the way throughout the book, and you're working with him here, you're working with him there. And like I wasn't going to bring specifics up about the characters in that game, but it sounds incredible, not only as your graphic artist, but also as your friend and your sounding board. It sounded like you guys spent a lot of late nights eating pizza, drinking Coke, or whatever. What's he doing these days? Is he still in the business?
Honestly, we don't see each other that much. We don't talk that much, but we occasionally run into each other at retro gaming events. So I'm not. That's a question better suited for Jeff, I would say. You should get him on and give.
I would love to talk to him, just based on what's in your book.
No,
Sounds like a
I
great
mean, his
guy.
contributions to the video game industry are far and wide. Because he basically was the artist for Gottlieb.
Yeah.
So he was creating art for virtually everybody. We had a couple of programmers slash artists. So like there was a guy named Chris Brewer who is also an artist as well as a programmer, and Tim Skelly created his own art. But for the rest of us, and there maybe were 4 programmers, when I was hired. But Jeff would, whatever we were working on, Jeff would be supplying the art for that.
So that Superman game went through a lot of iterations. ProVidGuard Argus.
Yeah, that was my sort of like, jokey name for it. Yeah.
So that game, and we don't have to go into great detail because it's in the book and it's really well written on that. But was that iterative process? Because that one seemed to be different. Like you talked about QBert and tuning, and we've got more to talk about that later. But that seemed to be a dramatic version of software iteration. Did that happen a lot like that?
I think you didn't want it to happen quite that much. That was maybe more than you wanted it to happen. I mean, there were other games that kind of went through that, and I think listen, if something's not working, you want to fix it, right? You don't want to just throw it away. So I think it's part of the process. But yeah, I mean, they did give up on it. That's the sad part. The end of the story is that eventually they just said we can't make this work. Okay, the caveat to all of this that we're talking about is that like a couple of years ago, Jeff Lee and Tom Malinowski resurrected the ROMs for this game, and with the help of Doc Mack at the Galloping Ghost Arcade, they created a version of it that you could play at Doc's Arcade. I don't know if it's anywhere else. It might be, and so they gave it the name Argus, which is the last name that this, because ProVidGuard Argus is a collection of names it had, but they settled on Argus, and it's released. You can play it now.
That's so way cool.
And you can see the little me walking down the bottom of the screen because I'm one of the little pedestrians, and then you can see my rubble fall out and fall with no gravity, and then you can see the bulldozer come out and push it. You can see all that.
Oh, you talk about that era, and this is the same sort of thing I hear from other classic game developers. It was the wild, wild west, and when you talk to the Atari developers, Wild Wild West meant hot tubs, doobies, women in the hot tub, right? I mean, that's what Wild Wild West. That was it.
Wow.
It was crazy times apparently at Atari. Howard Scott Warshaw could tell you stories. But today you could borrow 2 or 3 concepts from hundreds of different genres that are out here right now and create something that could succeed and maybe even be taken as something new. But back then, it didn't. There was nothing to borrow from. You guys had to come up with this stuff from scratch. What was it like back in the QBert day? How do you draw inspiration when you're the beginner? You're at the beginning.
Well, I mean, it's like a writer. If you have a blank page in front of you, you have to fill that with words. If you're an artist, you have to fill that with images.
Those guys have reference material, though, at least, right? I mean, stories have been around since the beginning of time, and you can.
Well, yeah, but
art.
I guess the question is, do you sit down and say to yourself, I want to rehash something that's come before, or do I want to create something new? That's the first thing that anybody who's creating has to ask themselves. And believe me, I've run into plenty of people who sit down and go, oh, I'm just going to recreate something that's out. I'm just going to take this movie that I love and I'm going to change the little things here. And but if you sit down and you say, I just want to do something different, well, then you had many opportunities. You have fewer opportunities today to do something different because in video games, it feels like everything's been done. And again, you're always limited by your technology.
Yeah.
But at that time, the cartoony graphics were still somewhat new. So like we went through the 70s, we went through Pong and Nibbler and Tank and all these black and white with little white blocks on a black background. So, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong. And we were just, maybe like 2 years. I think, Space Invaders was like 78, and that was, black and white, blocky.
Yeah.
So I was hired at the beginning of 1982, and just those few years, we had this whole new graphical capability available. Larger sprites, 16 by 16 sprites, and 16 colors was like, oh my God, we've got 16 whole colors. So, but you do whatever comes to your mind. I mean, my goal in making a video game was that it should be fun. It should be something that I'm going to enjoy playing. And so I think I leaned into sort of the puzzle aspect of it. And again, the thing I'm leaving out, of course, is that there was no plan for QBert. The first, it started out strictly as a programming exercise. So it was just one of these things where I saw that Escher pattern of cubes filling a screen. And then I said, oh, wow, if a ball fell on that, on a cube, it would have one of two ways to bounce. And so that was just a lead in for me to do a little programming exercise. And then people saw that, because that was a goal, right? I just set myself a goal. And once I had balls falling on a pyramid, then people were like, wow, that looks pretty cool. And then everything else just sort of happened organically, and it evolved as one step at a time.
In the book, you discuss that it was a very, I guess you could say, loosey-goosey type of development environment back in those days. There were no deadlines, no pressure, nobody. Tim Skelly wasn't looking over your shoulder the whole time, waiting for you to deliver this or that. So none of the, I guess, kind of business parameters that likely keep modern day projects on course, the March of Death to Christmas, the Thanksgiving, all of that nonsense. So it might be hard for people to understand what motivated developers like you back then, when you didn't have the rigors of what we would call maybe modern software development working around you. I mean, you say self-motivation, and that sounds great, but it seems kind of foreign now. Can you comment on how you kept yourself motivated without those parameters?
I mean, I don't think it's difficult to be self-motivated when you're doing what you want to be doing, right? I mean, if you, think about, if you're hungry, you make yourself a meal, right? Or you go out and buy one. It's not, you're not analyzing how you're going to accomplish this task of eating, right? It's because you want to do it. I don't think it's any different. If you want the opportunity to make a video game and you are enjoying that process, you just do it. That's what you do.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how else to answer that.
Well, that's fair. I mean, but there were times in the book that you discussed on certain projects. You had some crazy deadlines. We're going to talk about us versus them later, but you had some of these really crazy deadlines where you were, working days, nights, holidays, weekends, trying to meet this deadline. And yeah, listen, everybody wants the paycheck. Everyone wants to bring home the money. But it seems like you were sort of in a position where you really did just get to do what you love and get paid for it. Like everybody's dream. I mean, everybody stays in a job because they at least somewhat like it, but you seem completely ecstatic to be doing what you're doing. I think that feels kind of rare these days.
Oh yeah, man, I think I was very lucky. I mean, it's one of the reasons I left Bell Labs is because the work I was doing on that operator console, the testing, that was never a dream of mine. In fact,
I was loving that.
I was hired by Bell Labs because I was looking for something that involved both hardware and software. Now, you could make the claim that writing tests and performing them involves some understanding of hardware and software, but honestly, it really doesn't. And so I felt, that what I was doing there wasn't what I really felt like I was hired to do, which was hardware and software development. Then I mentioned a little earlier, I was on loan to another group, and I did some pattern matching hardware. This was their R&D group. Speech recognition was science fiction then. They didn't exist. So that kind of work that I was doing for the R&D group was fascinating to me, and I was really liking that. But then I was only on loan to them, and so they were pulling me off to go do the next set of tests, which meant months at the office, just literally writing a test document, and then months in some office performing the tests. And I didn't want to do that, and they would not let me stay in the R&D group, and I quit. So part of it is recognizing that you are not doing something you want to be doing, and looking for a better opportunity, you know. But at Gottlieb, I'm not saying it was all sunshine and roses. You know, there were pressures, and there were concerns, and eventually there were deadlines, because that method, and I do talk about that in the book. It's that method of just letting people do whatever they wanted was not exactly sustainable as a department. You know, they were lucky with QBert and Mach 3 and Mad Planets, I'd say, which was a moderate success. But you know, then they started hiring people who were just spinning their wheels for months. And even at the beginning, there were a couple of games that spun their wheels and went nowhere. And yeah, it's you're taking a chance doing that, and eventually, you know, that the party was over at one point. So but still, you know, if you love what you're doing, you take the good with the bad.
So, despite being known for QBert, right, and that story has probably been told by you over and over again in panels, interviews. Of course, in the book, I mean, you're not leaving anything out in the book. So, if for some reason you don't know the story of QBert, it's there, and it's incredibly well written.
In the title.
It's in the title, so it better be in the book, right? You'd be surprised. But you discuss many times the concept of tuning, and you called it a daunting aspect of development. Can you tell the listeners what tuning really means? Because I thought it was an interesting concept.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so, you know, you've got a game and it plays a certain way, you know, but every little aspect of that game is adjustable, right? You know, the character's speed is adjustable, the enemy's speed, how smart the enemies are, how wide your collision detection areas are. I mean, how fast the enemies come at you. There's just so many, depending on, of course, whatever the game is, but there's so many variables that affect how easy it is to play, how hard it is to play, and that affects a person's desire to play it in the first place, their desire to continue to play it. What happens if they master it? Does it continue to get challenging later on? That is all tuning, and it is daunting because, you know, you can tune it for yourself, but I mean, I don't know that I'm a representative of the average game player in an arcade, right? So, especially for QBert, because it was my first game, it was a very daunting task. And of course, you've got other people who are telling you stuff. They're giving you feedback, like people in the office who are just coming by and playing it. They're saying, "Oh, this is too hard. This is, you know, too fast," or, "Hey, he shouldn't fall off the pyramid." You know what I mean? These are the things that people are every day. Somebody's giving me some opinion about their feedback. Now, that's important feedback. I mean, I have to listen. I don't have to do everything they say, but I have to listen to what they say, because it is some kind of an indication. I have to decide, all right, you know, is what they're saying something I need to respond to? And again, there's no right or wrong answers. You just have to go with your gut.
You know, I came from a very small town during that era, and so I never stumbled upon anything nearly as cool as like a field test or a focus group for video games, or to be part of those types of groups. But that was really damn important in development back then, right?
Oh yeah, I think it still is. I don't know if they do it still. They may do it other ways, but you know, even later when I was working for Disney with home games in the 90s, we were still doing focus groups. So yeah, I think it's a very valuable thing. what I got out of it was that it's more valuable watching people's behavior than listening to what they say. It's just very, and I don't understand that dynamic entirely, but people seem to want to sound less excited about something. But
You mentioned that.
When you watch them play, you can see just exactly how much they're enjoying it or not enjoying it or frustrated by it.
Would you share the story? You don't want to, I understand. I mean, we don't want to give too much of the book away, but would you talk about the little girl playing QBert in the field? I thought that was a really neat, fun story.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, we would put arcade games out in arcades. We had agreements with the arcades. They'd let us put new games in. And then we would do what they called coin tests. You just put it in the arcade, and after a week, or some number of days, whatever, you want to see how many quarters it took in. And you can use that data to get your distributors interested in buying more of these games. And we were manufacturers. That's what we wanted to sell and build and sell games. But it's also odd because you're sort of like a little fly on the wall, but you're not a fly, you're a human being. And when you're an adult and you're standing in an arcade, just kind of loitering, waiting for somebody to walk up to a machine to see what they do, it's an odd thing, but that's what I did. I mean, I would go to the arcade, watch the game, just see if people would walk up, see, again, kind of like in a focus group, but without the one-way glass, just watch what people do. So in this one arcade, a little girl, I think she was maybe 10 or 12, walked up and put the quarter in, started to play, just immediately pushed on the joystick, jumped off the pyramid and died immediately.
That's how I play QBert.
She gets her other life. Okay, she gets her next life. Does exactly the same thing.
Ouch.
Gets her third life. Does exactly the same. Maybe she jumped once and then jumped on. I don't remember, but it was really over quickly. And I was worried. I'm like, oh no, because people did say to me, you shouldn't be able to jump off the pyramid. And I thought about that, and I thought, no, I think you should. I think staying on the pyramid is an important part of the game that you should have to learn. Anyway, she kind of walked away after that, and I'm like, hey. Then somebody else comes by, and other people again might have had success, but she came back and tried it again, which was a good sign.
Yeah.
And didn't fare that much better. But the crux of the story is that at some point she was able to watch somebody else play who didn't jump off the pyramid, and somehow she was able to figure out how not to jump off the pyramid and die. And then she came back. And so the critical part of the story is she wanted to come back, and she figured out how not to die. And that was encouraging, because at least that means people are interested enough to keep coming back. And as it turned out, of course, people did keep coming back, and the game was successful.
So you described at a meeting where QBert finally got his name. And that painted the greatest visual in my head. I would have, speaking of the fly on the wall, I would have killed to be in that room. And I don't want to ruin all the fun about how the game name came along. People can read the book for that. But when you akin the meeting to a Monty Python sketch, I almost lost it. So I have to know, do you remember any of the goofiest names that came out of that? During that
honestly
sketch?
I don't. I remember very little from the meeting, but what I do remember a little bit is before that meeting, I had gone around to everybody in the office and polled them for suggestions for the name of the game, because I honestly, I just wasn't interested in a name, in the naming of it. I was again, it was just a programming exercise. And then all of a sudden it's a game. Then all of a sudden it's on the schedule, and it's going to be a real thing. And it's like, we know we have to give it a name, but I'm like, that's a responsibility I didn't want to have. Yeah. So I just went around to everybody, and the one name that I literally filled up a whole 8.5 by 11 pad of names, like 2 columns every line. Maybe it was more than one page, but everybody had ideas, and I just didn't like any of them. The one that I remember was Arnie Aardvark. One of our managers came up with Arnie Aardvark, and I was
catchy.
like, I'm not naming this Arnie Aardvark. But it was kind of that way. It was like they were
Yeah.
all, they were valiant attempts, but none of them really hit. And then in the meeting, it was kind of the same thing. We just really, it felt like we spun our wheels for a very long time. And then all of a sudden, as you will read, if you get the book, it sort of came together.
Yeah, it's a great story. Again, it's one of those things that it's almost worth the price of the book just to go through that process. That's too bad you don't remember any of them. I mean, I could just imagine. Anyway.
I wish I had the paper.
Yeah, what an artifact that would be to have, right?
I have a box, or I had a box in my attic that had a lot of old Gottlieb stuff. I was kind of surprised what I found. I found, I found the, their benefits, explanation. I found their rules of conduct and things like that. I found the actual piece of paper that you sign that basically says everything you're doing is a work for hire and they own whatever you create. I have that piece of paper. I found that.
That's crazy.
But I don't, and I think there's more to be seen. I yet or dug up. I don't even know. It's the stuff in my attic has been there since the move to California. We made that move in '96. And I think there's stuff up there I haven't looked at since 1996, honestly. So it could be up there. I don't know.
There's some really neat photos and illustrations. Now you gave me a digital copy, sort of a preview version. So I don't know. The pictures seem to be like they fall in the middle of the book. So you're on like page 160 and then you've got like 30 pages of pictures and then you land on the next printed page. And there was some really interesting artwork in there. Is there anything you'd like to call out to kind of whet their appetite as to what they might see in those pictures?
Wow.
Like the blue box was cool to me, but I'm like a developer, so that's interesting to me.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that when I self-published, I took all of the photos, images, graphics that I could find and just put them in an insert in the center of the book. And then working with my publisher on this new version, I guess they didn't want to have quite as big of a color insert, so we reduced the number of color images and put a lot of the images in black and white sprinkled throughout. So it's a kind of a different slight. There's some difference in the way that the images are presented, but gosh, I don't know what would be of interest to people and what wouldn't. I honestly, I think one of the things I think people might find interesting is the licensing brochure. I don't know if you remember that, but Gottlieb's marketing department came out with a licensing brochure, and there's a photo of it, and it just sort of lists a lot of the QBert related products that were made available when QBert, became so huge in 1983. Board games,
I did see that. Yeah.
T-shirts, socks. There were, I think, over 125 licensed QBert products then, and of course the Saturday morning cartoon. So yeah, I'm not sure what people would be of interest to people. There's a lot of behind the scenes. I know we haven't talked Us Versus Them yet, but there's a lot of behind the scenes photos from Us Versus Them
I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, from the aerial shoots. I took a lot of photographs when we were up in the plains. So yeah, there's I don't know. I just hope it's of interest to people.
I thought they were really cool. So let's continue moving through the history here. So you talk about when QBert debuted at the Amusement Machine Operators Association, and you painted a really cool picture of what that was like. And you mentioned that it was really cool to see a bank of your game and people getting to play it. I mean, you got to see people play it like on field test and stuff like that. And you mentioned it was surreal, but you didn't mention was it nerve-wracking as hell too? I mean, this is your peer group, right? I mean, this is your industry. It's not some 12-year-old girl with a quarter.
Well, I mean, certainly a lot of other game developers were there, but the AMOA, it was a sales show. I mean, it's where the manufacturers are showing off their new machines to their customers who are distributors. So the business model was, we were the manufacturer. We make the game. We literally build it and sell it to distributors, and the distributors put them out wherever they want to, in arcades, in bowling alleys, pizzerias, whatever. So we didn't literally make money out of the coin box. We made our money by building and selling the machine. Obviously, if we can prove that a game is being played a lot and will take in a lot of money, that makes it more desirable, and the distributors will buy more of them. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking. Again, I didn't have much invested in the sales. Well, if you read the book, you know that there's no like royalties on the table for me.
Oh, I've got that coming up, so we'll talk more about that.
But I wasn't really much interested. I got to tell you, in the business of making video games, I wasn't interested in that. For me, it was just nerve-wracking. I just wanted people to like the game. I just wanted people to find it fun and to want to play it.
That's really cool. It's kind of cool that you can divorce yourself from that, because like you said, it's not you weren't part of the sustainable leg of it. Your job was kind of done at that point, and you'd produce the best quality product you could. And so whether it sold like gangbusters or it fizzled on the vine, your job was done. Job well done. You got paid. So yeah,
and it was my first game. So it's like I had a game under my belt, so I felt that felt was a huge accomplishment. But you're right. I didn't have much of a stake in whether it would be a success or not. Obviously, I wanted it to be.
Well, sure. Yeah. That's crazy. It's really cool though. So faster, harder, more challenging QBert was intended to be a ROM swap out, or I think they called those replacement kits to replace the ROMs in an existing machine, probably a QBert machine, I would assume, to extend the life of the game. So my mind's a little fuzzy on the time period. Was that a new-ish concept, doing kit replacements, or had that been around for a while?
I don't know that it was. I don't think it was that new of a concept. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't run off a list of other games that were, offered as kits. I just, for me, it was just a practical thing, created essentially out of worry that people were mastering QBert, too easily, which, that was just from preliminary reports. We would just get some, random reports that certain people, a small number really, but people were playing for many hours on one quarter. So
and that's bad.
It's generally bad, but there's another side to it too, which is that other people are incentivized to play, knowing that you can achieve that level. Then other people play more because they want to get to that level. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there, I guess. And but for me, because it was my first game, I was a little terrified getting reports like that, and I thought, okay, I need to respond. And so I just immediately started on a retuned version that I thought was harder. And also I had been pressured by my peers and management to make the game easier during its development. And I thought, I think I might've gone too far. So this was an opportunity for me to sort of go back and do I guess nowadays you'd call it the director's cut.
Right. The Zack Snyder cut at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I like it. I think I like it better than the original QBert. And the thing is, it's just another option. If you like the original QBert, that's great. But if you've mastered QBert and you want another challenge, I think it's a really great option. Of course, it was never released, as you know, and only got out into the public much later through MAME.
Yeah, I've got some follow-up questions on that. Let me tidy these last of the QBert questions up here. So you had mentioned merchandise of QBert, and it was funny because I was in my formative years when QBert came out, and I do remember like the lunchbox, and I remember merch. But it sounds like there was a lot more merch than I was ever exposed to. What's like the craziest merch based on QBert that you ever ran across? And do you still have any of it?
I wish I had more of it. The one thing I still have, I have the QBert plush toy that
Oh
that
man.
sat in my kid's crib. Uh, I still have that, but honestly, that's all I have really of the original merchandise. I didn't accumulate a whole lot of it. I certainly wasn't given any of it.
Right.
I think I had to go out and buy it myself.
You had to
But
pay.
yeah, it was just I think the board game kind of freaked me out that there was a QBert board game. There were certainly a lot of handheld electronic versions of
Oh
QBert.
sure.
And just seeing him on T-shirts and socks and stuff like that, it was mind-blowing. It was really, really strange.
Be part of pop culture all of a sudden.
Oh yeah, and through it all, I am completely anonymous. Nobody knows that there's a person behind
That
it.
sucks.
Yeah. No, it wasn't that bad. That part of it's not
You
because
were okay with that?
well, fame fame is not ever something I went after. I mean, being famous to me is not a goal. I appreciate that people liked my work, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah, the
But
entertainment.
yeah,
You're an entertainer.
yeah, but that's about it.
So once QBert became the big crazy hit and they were making lunchboxes and T-shirts, the home ports were obviously the next thing to come along. And I think a lot of people who aren't super video game savvy might assume that you had something to do with the ports. But as the book discussed, it's not really how it worked. They were farmed out, and you were consulted from time to time.
Right.
What, in your opinion, what was the best and worst home port of QBert? I mean, you sort of
Yeah.
alluded to one in the book, but
Right. No, I've answered this question quite a bit. My favorite one was the ColecoVision.
beautiful
Because
version.
it was really just very close to the arcade version. I owned personally a ColecoVision system, and I just thought it looked and played very, very close to the arcade version. So I was very happy with that one. I think there might have been one or two others that also were good, but I didn't own them. So
Yeah.
mostly the ColecoVision one is what I remember. But and I also remember like the Atari 2600 version. I just felt was just terrible. But I have sympathy for the developers of it because they're trying to make a system do something it was never designed to do.
Yeah.
And so I give them a lot of props, but I wouldn't want to sit and play that version. Yeah.
And so you didn't have any really significant contributions to any of the home ones, nothing that you feel close to or.
Not really. I mean, I like you said, I was consulted. I remember having phone conversations with some people who were unclear on either some of the level progressions. I wrote stuff up and it got sent off to them, but I didn't really have much contact or involvement.
So we're going to leave QBert behind because the book is loaded with so much more stuff than just the story of the Noser. But
It's not
before
just
we do,
QBert.
I know.
There's
So
that subtitle and other classic
and
video
others. We got to get to the and other. See, it says right here, and others. I had to practice a lot to get my hand to point to the right place on the book.
Oh, that's very impressive.
I did a test this morning with my wife, and she's like, "You're pointing to the wrong thing." I was like, "Which way is it?" That's why I ended up putting two of them so I wouldn't miss.
Yeah.
So before we move off of QBert, what was the greatest, I don't know, event, prize, situation that was afforded to you by the popularity of QBert? Was it the Robin Williams connection, the goodwill it would bank with you later at Williams, or something different?
It was both of those. I mean, it was a calling card for the rest of my career. Just to go into any place and go, wow, you created QBert. I think there were people who invited me to job interviews, just because they saw that on the resume. You had no desire to hire me, but they just wanted to meet me, which is fine. That's totally fine.
So vocational prowess would probably be your.
Yeah, certainly it helped me get in the door at Williams, no question.
Yeah.
And the thing is, then all the stuff I did at Williams helped me get in other doors later. So
And we
yeah,
got
it
so
was
much to talk about with Williams.
yeah.
I've got detailed files.
Uh-oh.
So between
Are you,
QBert
are you the
and us versus
FBI?
them, what's
Uh-huh.
that?
I
I'm
said, are
sorry.
you the FBI? You
I
have
am.
detailed files.
I have done detailed breakdown. I feel like I know you personally. So between QBert and us versus them, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, you played around with several game ideas, including the fly game. Which, listen, if you're going to buy this book, and it's not just about QBert for you, the fly game is easily my favorite sub story in the book.
Uh-huh.
And also something called Bunny Bondage, slightly inspired by Ricochet Rabbit. Now that's a name I have not heard in a long time. Long time. The disposition of that Bunny Bondage was very hastily discarded in the book. So does this code exist anywhere? Do you have videos of it being played? Can you show this in existence anywhere? I'm dying to
Um,
see it.
I do not think the code exists anywhere.
Oh.
I actually do. I have again, my attic. I have just tons of floppy disks that I haven't looked at in years. I
Yeah.
don't even know if they are still readable. I don't know what's on them. I don't think they are Gottlieb code. I don't
Hmm.
think, but who knows? However, there is video footage of bunny bondage,
Is
and
it like something that the normal mortals can get to?
I do have video footage of bunny bondage. It's maybe like I want to say 30 seconds to a minute, maybe, and it's part of a little behind the scenes video I shot at Gottlieb. Just we were just literally just horsing around, but it happened to be on a screen, so I got some of it, and I show it. I occasionally I will show it at a show. I just showed it recently at Free Play Florida. Um, so yeah, it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't say it's readily available, but yeah, I take it with me every now and then and show it.
It's
Yeah,
a fun
it's
story.
I still think it was. I still like the gameplay concept.
I thought it sounded cool.
I don't think I've seen that concept ever used in a video game.
No,
I
and that's like gold.
yeah,
You need to dust
but
that
it just
off and I don't know,
yeah, it
make
just
an indie
speaks
game out of it.
to yeah, it's just the kind of thing where I mean, I was always looking for something different. I mean, I was never one to just try and repeat something that happened already. You know, so that's always my goal is to try to do something original. But anyway, yeah, I kind of got bored with it, and I think the problem was not with the concept, but with me. I just I didn't know where to take it, and I just kind of got bored. I felt like I was spinning my wheels, and then the opportunity for us versus them sort of fell into my lap when I
Yeah.
was approached by Dennis Nordman, and then it was like, all right, well, goodbye,
Nah,
Bunny Bondage.
we're good with the bunny for now.
Maybe I'll come back to you later. And I don't think I did.
So we talked about this a little bit, but it's probably worth flushing out a little bit. So you got a really nice little bonus check for QBert, like 20 grand. That's what 1986 money, 85 money.
No,
That's
it would have been sooner than that because
oh
Gottlieb
yeah.
closed in '84. But I'm gonna say like '83, late '83, maybe '84, maybe.
That's pretty good change for 1983. You said it
Yeah,
like
actually,
helped you
let me
buy
think
your
about it. No, it
house.
had to be '83 because it was '83 because I used that money for the down payment on a condo in
Yeah.
Chicago. It was my first property that I owned. Yeah.
But you know, you sort of alluded to this earlier, and I figured this topic might come up, but many people don't realize that you didn't own anything. You own the bragging rights. That was all, as you said in the book. That's all you got from that. You didn't get any residuals, no merch, none of that stuff. So, like, I guess that's pretty much how it worked. But you did mention something called the Gottlieb royalty program, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about that because I thought that seemed like kind of a little slippery deal.
Well, no, I don't know about that. I wouldn't call it slippery. It's just that they instituted a royalty program. It was part of the evolution of the company, and they realized other people are doing it. If they want to hold on to their talent, if you want to call us that, if they want to hold on to their people, they need to institute a royalty program. So they did. Only problem was it was not retroactive. So QBert was not included, and Mach 3, which was already out when the royalty program was instituted, was not included. Future games would have been included.
But you did mention, like I think at the end of the chapter or the paragraph there, that you didn't believe that anybody actually made any royalties from that program.
Yeah, I don't think that there was. I don't think they came out with a game because the Gottlieb was shut down in 1984. Now, Us versus Them came out. I'm pretty sure Us versus Them would have been included in that royalty program, but the problem is it was a laserdisc game, and then that's the whole other story is the debacle.
It's coming. That's our next one.
Yeah. So Us versus Them didn't make enough to have a royalty, and then the company was shut down.
So there was nothing seedy about it. It wasn't like they put unachievable goals or anything like that. It was just the option just never came up.
Yeah, it was just timing. It was just they instituted it at a point where they never had the opportunity to pay anything out because they didn't have a success. Yeah.
That's too bad. So let's fast forward. 1983, Dragon's Lair drastically, although rather shortly, changed the landscape of video gaming. Most people at least know of Dragon's Lair, but few may remember Us versus Them, and we'll get to that why of that. The book has over 30 pages discussing your involvement in this game, so we have a lot to talk about. But as a precursor,
we don't have enough time to talk about all of this.
Oh no, we're gonna have to do this in another interview. Give the audience a quick overview of what that game was and how it differed from the QuickTime event style of Dragon's Lair.
So Dragon's Lair was basically an interactive cartoon where you had to push the joystick in a particular direction at certain key moments to keep you alive. Otherwise, you cut to a death. That was it. And it was not, I mean, that type of interactivity didn't really appeal to me. I didn't like playing it. And I mean, listen, I'm not going to argue with its success. Clearly a very successful game. But Dennis Nordman, now we had already done Mach 3. So we had our Laserdisc hardware in place. We had a lot of, diagnostic tools were already in, a lot of that stuff. But Dennis Nordman came to me with a concept for this sort of B movie kind of science fiction cheesy story, and I was like all over it. I just thought that was fantastic. So we started working on Us versus Them, and there was a lot of development talk about how are we going to do this, because it's how do you make it interactive? How do you meld the live action with the, so originally we were talking about just cutting like a movie, like here's this flying sequence and you're shooting at alien ships and then you cut to people on the ground and then you cut back into the air. And we just thought that's the way we would do it. And I that concerned me because it just was like, well, it's disorienting. I mean, if you're flying and you're targeting an enemy, because it's not a movie, it's interactive. And then all of a sudden you're about to shoot and then you cut away to something, you're going to be pissed, right?
Yeah, right.
So we had to figure out how to do it. And then we decided just to do it with intros. Every wave of gameplay had an intro and then sometimes an outro. And then sometimes we, the thing that I really didn't think would work, but they really wanted to try. And I said, all right, let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Were what we called the interstitials, where once in the middle of a round, you would cut away to something just for 2 or 3 seconds and then cut back. Usually some kind of visual gag, something to give you a chuckle, and then you cut back. So it didn't interrupt gameplay too much. But I was concerned about it. I thought people would be pissed, but people liked it. We kept it in. So anyway, that's Us versus Them in a nutshell. There's so much to talk about Us versus Them.
Oh, listen, I got like 100 of these. I know you're on a time schedule here, and maybe we can do a part 2 of this. I'm trying to think of how I could collapse like these next questions, because I really don't want to shortchange your knowledge here.
Well, I mean, people could just buy the book.
Buy the book, and you'd get everything.
You read the book.
Um,
You know, hopefully the book will appear in libraries at some point.
that would be
But
great.
wouldn't that be cool? Then
Um,
you just
I
don't even have to pay for it.
Yeah, well, listen, buy the book. It's $25. I mean, listen, it's all these stories and so much more. I mean, again, the us versus them thing, I got like 5 more things to talk about with that
Pick your
before we
best
haven't even got to
two.
Williams yet. Um, but to close up us versus them real quick, it would be easy to assume that this was stock footage that you guys had, or that maybe you lifted or licensed a B movie or something to pull the information from. But it's totally not true. And I think that's one of the more interesting pieces of the remaining of the us versus them is you guys went on location and talk just a little bit about that.
Yeah, we realized that to get the kind of footage we wanted, we needed to actually shoot it ourselves. It wasn't like we're just going to go find stock footage. That was exactly what we needed. Part of the thing we were trying to accomplish was um, we're because we want to have sort of a movie quality. The game is played from different angles. So sometimes it's a side scroller, sometimes it's a first person, sometimes you're a little above looking down. So
Yeah.
you know, to get all these angles, which were very specific, we needed to shoot our own footage, and we wanted to hit a lot of locations around the country. So we did one shoot. Dennis and I flew out to California. I don't know how we found these producer guys, but somebody found these guys and went out to Clay Lacey Jets in Burbank, and we were out in a Learjet flying over Lake Powell in Utah and Arizona, among other places. And we shot a whole bunch of footage. We sort of explained what we needed, how we needed it. And then they went out all around the place and shot tons more. Sometimes they shot helicopter stuff, but the jet stuff was definitely smoother. Obviously, we speeded this stuff up as well. And I
Right.
got to edit all of this. So I also, you know, we shot all the, you know, we hired the actors, we hired a production company to build us sets. We went and shot all, and Dennis and I, with help from Rich Tracy, who is the art director, and Dave Faust was another guy. We all sort of contributed to the script. I think it was mostly me and Dennis. And yeah, we had a script, and we hired actors, and we shot all this. And it's crazy because the guy who played Captain Tracy, who's like the hero in the control center, he was a friend of mine from my acting class.
There you
And
go.
so I literally, I just had a meal with him, like, I would say a month ago. He was out in LA. I hadn't seen him in like 35 years. And we just got together. So that's a crazy little coincidence there.
So
Anyway,
if nothing else, if if my listeners are paying attention, we're not even halfway through the book yet. So if you're concerned that the amount of content and the greatness of these stories, because I've got a ton more questions that we're not going to get to, it should really show how much meat is in this book. I think it's 280 something pages right in there.
something around, yeah, somewhere around that. Yeah.
It's and there's so much in there. There's so many of these types of stories. We haven't talked about Revolution X or Terminator 2 or
Yeah.
all of these other. It's you've had an amazing career. And
Yeah.
it's
And
all
then,
in this book.
the book really only covers my years in the arcade industry. I talk a little bit about Disney at the end because when I moved to California in the mid 90s, I worked for Disney Interactive, for a few years, and then I became an Imagineer for a very short time. And there are plenty of stories there to talk about that I don't even begin to talk about.
Yeah.
And then, but I do mention Disney a little bit because some things related to my arcade days happened while I was at Disney. And again, we don't have to go into that right now, but so there's a little bit of talk like that. And then, you know, back and then even in the 2000s, I was still working in the game industry. I was on the team that created I want to say, ill-fated Spyro Enter the Dragonfly, which probably could be a book unto itself. That game was sadly kind of a disaster. I think widely recognized as the one failure, the one Spyro failure, maybe. And again, I mention this only because people have been coming to me over the last couple of years asking about that. I thought it was kind of like QBert. I just thought it was forgotten. It was part of the past, and then all of a sudden, people are starting to contact me asking me about Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. So it's really weird how the interest in video game history has, somehow been piqued, and people are starting to question where did these games come from, which is wonderful, and I'm happy to supply as many answers as I can. But yeah, there might be a whole nother book coming someday if I.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a tease. That last chapter, loose ends, I think it was called, where
Mm,
you sort of tidy all these things up, and more questions, more interesting information from the mind of Warren Davis for sure.
yeah, yeah. I also want to mention if you're interested in history, and again, I know we haven't talked much about Williams, but there is a fascinating documentary about Williams and its history that I appear in briefly, but it's called Insert Coin. Directed
Great documentary.
Yeah. So, I mean, I highly recommend that to people
Yes.
if you're really interested in the Williams side of things. My contribution was pretty much the digitizing system that was used for most of their games, and also I was on the team that created Terminator 2 and Revolution X. That's what I did basically at Williams in a nutshell. But there's a lot of there's a lot of fun stories there, and I think Insert Coin does a great job of fleshing that out.
I thought that was I've plugged that on this show several times already, and CertCoin is fantastic. It's must view. There's a lot of video game documentaries out there. Their hearts are in the right place, but and CertCoin is not one of them. That's top notch stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, listen, I think I've already taken you over time. I appreciate it. Maybe again, I've got so much more we could talk about if we had more time.
Well,
But
happy to do a part two, you
I would
know.
love to do part two because I've
Yeah.
got so much stuff to talk about. I know a lot of people were probably hoping to hear more Williams stuff here. Um, I got requests to talk about working with David Thiel, and I guess we can save that all for another time.
Yeah. Happy to do it. Happy to do it. Yeah. Just
Good
say
stuff.
when.
So again, the book is Creating QBert and Other Classic Video Arcade Games. It
Mm.
is available for pre-order right now, so go out and get it. Go pre-order it. Hey, do you get any visibility on that? Do you know how the book is doing from a pre-order standpoint? They don't probably tell you that stuff. That's all publisher stuff,
You
right?
know what? Coincidentally, I literally just had a conversation with my publisher
Oh,
this
really?
morning, and
Oh,
I asked him about that, and he said that the pre-sales were very strong. So
awesome.
that's fantastic. I'm very, very, very encouraged to hear that. And so the the first printing is actually on the larger side,
Oh,
and of
good.
course, if they sell out, there will be another printing. They just make them as they need them. But yeah, this is good news. I was curious about that myself. We had not talked about that at all up until
Yeah.
this morning.
Well, that's great. Yeah, so it's due to release on December 21st. Again, it'll be available in Kindle format. Get the hardback. Don't get the Kindle version. That's so cheap and tough. Get the stuff you can hold. In 20 years, you'll still be able to look at that and open it up
Yeah,
and read it.
I can't sign a Kindle version.
There you go. See, thinking outside the box again. That's
I'm just
exactly
kidding.
right.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't care how people get it. If they're interested in it, that, my goal in writing it was just to collect these stories for
Yeah.
posterity. I love telling the stories, but I can't be everywhere to tell the stories. And there is a historical aspect, and I kind of was frustrated with hearing other people tell my stories in
Yeah,
not
no kidding.
quite the right, way. It's really interesting. People get things very, very close to right, but then they just miss out on some nuance. And I just felt like I'm the one who should be telling the story anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
anyway,
You
don't
tell it
get me
well.
started. Yeah,
So,
don't get me started on Wikipedia.
oh, geez. The fake news of the internet. Okay, well, anything else before we let you go that you want to talk about? Everyone go out and get the
You
book.
know, well, yeah, I got put a little plug in for the New Wave Toys Replicate version of QBert. I don't. Are you aware of that? Have you heard
I
of
did
these?
not know there was a QBert. I own a Dragon's Lair,
Mm.
oddly enough,
Yeah.
and so I like the form factor, but I've got to be really close to the game to put out that kind of cash. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So they approached me early this year, saying they'd like to do a version of QBert. Well, that's super and all fantastic, but I said, well, I don't own the rights to QBert, so what can
go
I
talk to
do for
Sony.
you? And they were like, well, we heard that you have a sort of unique QBert cabinet in your home, which is somewhat true. It was an engineering sample, and it's sort of been Frankensteined a little bit. It's got the swearing marquee, and it's been in my possession for like 38 years or whatever. And they said they read about it because Tony Temple, the arcade blogger, wrote a blog about rare QBert cabinets, and he included my cabinet in that. So that's how they heard about it, and they were like, "Well, we not only want to make a replicate version of a production QBert, we want to make your version. We want to make a Warren Davis special edition."
Wow.
So that's what they are doing, and again, because of COVID, much like the book, it's been delayed. It should have been out by now, but and they had a pre-order event back in July, and sold out on their pre-orders, and they are literally just waiting because of shipping and production
Sure.
problems with COVID. They're just waiting to get them in so they can start fulfilling their pre-orders and then selling them again. But hopefully early next year, you will be able to buy either a working QBert cabinet or the Warren Davis special edition. And I will also mention that at I want to say kind of insistence, I said, look, if you're going to do a Warren Davis version of the cabinet, it has to have faster, harder, more challenging QBert, because
Yes.
that is my QBert of choice. It's the QBert that I've had in my cabinet, for 99% of the time. Sometimes I'll swap out the ROMs for somebody who, wants to play the original. But,
Yeah.
and so they have put both versions of the game, the original and faster, harder, more challenging, in both versions of the cabinet. So whether you get the production version or the Warren Davis version, you can switch between the two versions. And it's
That
amazing. It's amazing. You have the Dragon's Lair, so these are
it's
the
gorgeous.
phenomenally engineered. They are perfectionists. They're more perfectionists than I am. Not that I'm a perfectionist, but I've tried to go over their prototype and give them feedback and say, well, this needs to be changed, or this is that. They're worse than I am as far as the details. They're not happy unless it's absolutely 100% correct.
They actually shipped Dragon's Lair with a non-working laser disc, which is like the absolute. I mean, you want to talk about perfection.
Yeah, no, these guys are obsessive, and it shows in their product. They make a fantastic product. So anyway, New Wave Toys, newwavetoys.com. Again, I don't think you can buy either right now. They're waiting to get the production in, but soon they will be available.
That's way exciting. I mean, especially being able to have the Warren Davis edition. That's
Yeah, I can't
that's
wait.
actually
I
more
want
special to
one.
me than the original cabinet, right?
I mean, it's a unique cabinet, that's for sure. It's a weird. There, some of the artwork is slightly different, things like that. But and there are other similar Frankenstein cabinets out there because they were based on the engineering samples that went out before production. So there are a handful of those out there. I don't know how many exactly have survived, but there are some.
The story never ends. There's always so much to talk about. That's awesome. All
It's
right.
crazy.
Well, thank you again for your time. Trying to be respectful. We're 12 minutes over, so let's try to work this out, and we'll get a part two going on. See what hopefully we can drum up some interest in the book. It sounds like
That would
it's
be
doing well.
fantastic. That would be fantastic. I feel like it's kind of a niche book. I don't know if it's a mainstream of mainstream interest to people, but I think the people who are interested in retro gaming history or in QBert specifically, I think they'll find it entertaining. It's always my goal. just to entertain. So
Entertain. To be the
I hope you
entertainer.
found it entertaining.
I loved it. I loved it. And you know what's and again, I'd really like to stress, even if QBert's not your jam, there's plenty of other stuff, including NBA Jam information contained within the covers. So there's something for everybody, and highly recommended.
Well, thank you, Shane, for the time. I really appreciate
The pleasure's all mine.
your support.
Anytime, anytime. Well, thank you, good sir. And as always, this is Shane R. Monroe with Passenger Seat Radio, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.